You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Rick Scott, who is the 45th governor of the state of Florida. Governor Scott, it's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's great to be with you today.
I know that you're very involved in the state of, with your state and with Israel, and we certainly appreciate the something like $200 million of trade that goes on between over the ocean. As the governor of Florida, how would you describe the current relationship between the U.S. and Israel?
Well, clearly, Israel is probably our most important partner in the world in defending freedom in the world. I think every American is unbelievably impressed with the tenacity of Israelis, of their commitment to defending their country, to building their country, and Americans are very supportive of Israel. In Florida, as you know, we have 750,000 Jews in Florida. They're very supportive of Israel. And the trade between the two countries is very important. I guess Florida's not a country, but they say the Florida and Israel is very, very important. So, one of my goals is to do everything I can to increase trade, both Florida exports and Florida imports from Israel, and continue to build our relationship.
I think both sides do a lot of work in oranges. You have Florida oranges, and we have Jaffa oranges. I guess it's a little bit of a competition.
So you've lived in both countries. What do you like better? I guess in Israel, you have to say you like the Israeli oranges. It's like when I go to football games in Florida, whatever team is there, I root for them.
Uh-huh. So the relationship, frankly, a lot of people in Israel, the Americans, there's many Americans who've moved to Israel. They're beginning to feel, or they felt, I'd say, in the past year or two, that the U.S. view on Israel might have gotten a little bit more chilly than it's been in the past. Do you sense that? Do you see where we're going in this relationship?
Well, I believe that Americans are very supportive of Israel. I think that this current administration could be more supportive. But I believe if you talk to the Americans and talk to anybody on the street, I think everybody would say that Israel's relationship with America is very important to America. I think that Americans are very respectful and admire what Israel's done to build their country, and just the tenacity with all the issues they deal with in the Middle East.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the U.S. now. Americans, again, who I deal with a lot. My day job is that I'm a financial advisor. I deal a lot with Americans who've moved to Israel, but they keep their investments in the States, and they've noted that they're frankly a little concerned over the past several years. There obviously was a huge shakeup, and there are a lot of people in politics who are calling for a major government reform in the U.S., like changing the tax system, massive budget cuts, huge changes. Do you think this is necessary, and do you think that we might see such changes that'll help to really boost the U.S. economy?
Here's what I think. I think we're having a real discussion in America about the size of government. I think Americans are reviewing all their taxes, and that's at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. They're saying, what return am I getting for all these tax dollars? I think that Americans are starting to say, look, we cannot put ourselves at an economic disadvantage by having higher income taxes or higher business taxes or more regulation or more permitting or more litigation than other parts of the world, or American companies will do poorly. Because I ran for office for the first time. I've been in business all my life. And I can tell you the issue that everybody in Florida, and I think the issue that everybody in the United States worries about is, tell me about how I'm going to keep my job or how I'm going to get a job. We have much higher unemployment than we historically have had, and people are disappointed in how our federal government has handled it. They don't believe we should have the deficits we have. we cannot run. They know we cannot run a country with trillion-dollar deficits. They're concerned about the debt load of our country, and they're concerned about the intrusion in individuals' lives. There's a health care bill that passed a couple of years ago that now 26 or so states have sued, declared unconstitutional. It basically tells us that we have to buy health care, and exactly what type of health care we have to buy. Where does it end? Can they tell us to eat broccoli? They can tell us to buy American cars. Where's the limit?
Mm-hmm. Well, my mother does tell me to eat a lot of broccoli, but that's enough if she tells me. We are talking to the 45th governor of the state of Florida, Rick Scott. Not only is he a governor, but when he was younger, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He served as a radar man on the USS Glover. So from an Israeli standpoint, we certainly appreciate people who've served in the military because everyone here does. He then went on the GI Bill. He went to school. He went to law school. Eventually, he became a big player in the healthcare system in the U.S. So we're very happy to have Governor Scott here. Governor, let me follow up what you're talking about, how people feel about taxes. Obviously, no one likes paying taxes, but there is a certain need. Would you say that Florida is a more tax-friendly state than other states?
It's probably the most tax-friendly state. We don't have a personal income tax in Florida. We have a very low business tax, which I'm in the process of phasing out. It's not a significant portion of our state budget. So in the next 7 years, I'll be able to phase that out, I believe, as long as our economy does well. So our state is a state that knows that for us to grow jobs, we have to make sure that businesses do well. So we want to keep their taxes as low as possible. We want to make it easier to get permits to expand. We make sure we don't have regulation that basically just kills jobs, and we want to make sure that they don't have a risk of lawsuits that are unfair.
Okay, that sounds like a good place to set up. A lot of Americans, in fact, just to relate to the clients that I deal with here in Israel, a lot of clients move overseas when they retire because the cost of living is cheaper. There's certainly a lot in South America, and I personally see the many thousands of Americans who live here. One of the big concerns that people have on the federal level is that Social Security is going to have a real problem. In fact, they admit it themselves in a few years. Do you think that the Americans who've left the United States are going to be the first target to have their benefits cut?
I've not heard anything to suggest that. I don't think that would be fair. One of the concerns I have, and I think the concern is the same as the federal, the state, and the local. We have, as the federal government, the state governments around the country, and local, have overpromised retirement. We've not put the money away to really pay for retirement. As you know, Social Security is going to run out of money in a few years. But we have pension plan programs around the country that are not funded properly at the state level and at the local level. And so you're starting to see now significant changes. Young people, as they get out and understand the obligations that they're going to have to pay for, are saying, enough's enough. I'm not ever going to see that benefit, so we're going to have to change that benefit because we cannot, that generation is not going to be willing to pay for a generation that didn't put enough money away.
The problem is, unfortunately, is that people seem to be personally as incredibly irresponsible with their budgets as, shall we say, the federal government, which is $16 trillion in debt. Can we really count on the population to, in fact, save for their own retirement properly?
I think people will. I think that one thing we know that more government dependency doesn't work anywhere. It's never worked anywhere. The more we rely on individual responsibility, the better off people are. So I believe that people will save for their retirement as long as they know that they need to. I think we've got to be very careful not to overpromise. Plus, I think that families will take care of their parents. I think it's one thing to take care of your parents, and another thing to take care of people that you don't know. And I think what we have now is we have a system that was not pre-funded by the generation that's relying on these benefits. And I think the younger generation is saying enough's enough.
Okay, so in Florida, you seem to have a rather aging population. what are the effects of? Maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but when I go down to Florida, it seems that everyone's a lot older than than the people I see in New York. How does your economy manage if everyone is or so many more retirees than actual tax-paying workers?
But we have a slightly higher number of retirees than workers, but we have a fast-growing state, and just this year, as an example, we've generated over 100,000 jobs already this year, and people are moving into our state. So, and it's all generations are moving into our state. So, because they know that this is Florida is still a frontier. Florida is a place where you can still build your business and do well because Florida companies do well because of our tax structure, our regulations, and things like that. So what we have to do is continue to live within our means, which we do at the state level. We balance our budget here in Florida. We also are paying down our state debt. We have a higher credit rating than our federal government has now. We have a AAA credit rating. We'll be paying down some of our debt this year, and while I'm governor, we'll continue to do that to make sure we're in the position that if you're a retiree under our system in Florida, that you will be able to continue to get paid.
Okay, let me go back to a more political question now. One of the big concerns, again, a lot of Americans living in Israel have, is the Jonathan Pollard issue. They're concerned that Jonathan Pollard, who was arrested by the United States and was sentenced to life in prison, has maybe spent more time in there than someone else and than many other people who were similarly charged. Do you think this is ever going to change, or is he going to end up dying in prison?
I read some about that, and I don't understand. There's not enough facts that are out there to understand why he's not been released. I don't. So when there's something like that out there, you always assume there's more to it than maybe what they've released. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we have to wait for a little more information. Although it certainly is a pressing issue, I think, for a lot of Americans who are living in Israel, as well as Americans in the United States. Listen, Governor Scott, we are just about out of time. I just want to ask you the final question: is will we be interviewing you sometime in the future as you are making a run for the U.S. presidency?
I like being governor. This is, as you know, I've lived the American dream. I started school living in public housing, and I was able to get an education, be in the service. I was in the Navy during the Middle East War of '73, and my ship was over in the Mediterranean at the time, and there was some talk that we would possibly end up involved in that, but didn't end up happening. But I've been in business, and this is the first time I've run for office, and I ran because I want to get our state and our country back to work. And but I'm very optimistic that that's going to happen. We're going through a presidential race right now, and we'll see what happens there. But my goal is just to get our state back to work and make sure we live within our means.
Fabulous. Okay, Governor Rick Scott, thank you very much for joining us.
All right, have a great day.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.